Ever since I can remember, I knew something was off about me. Nobody explicitly told me that I was doing anything wrong, but I understood in people's glances that I was not right. It seemed like I was making a mistake every time I would talk to someone or just be in people's general vicinity. The thing, though, was that I didn't know what I was doing wrong that made people think I was so off-putting and strange. When I was a child, I'd play under the play equipment and pretend to be a vampire hiding from the sun, but that was just me being a kid. And I think we can all agree that children can be pretty strange at times. And I mean, other kids my age did much stranger stuff, like they would misbehave in class, interrupt the teacher, say rude comments to other people. I just didn't get it. If I did something like that, I'd be filled with a sense of dread and shame that would just take over my stomach and my head would spin. I'd start to cry. And it's just horrible. Why would anyone do that? Whenever I'd specifically ask what made me so off-putting to people, I'd get responses like, well, I'm not quite sure. It's kind of hard to figure out. I'm sorry for your loss or whatever. Or something along the lines that I was unapproachable and that people didn't want to be around me because I didn't say hi. The thing, though, was that I was always described by other people as kind and sweet. So it didn't really make sense to me that I could be both unapproachable and rude, but also kind and sweet. It just didn't connect. And honestly, I don't know if it connects with anyone. I remember a specific instance when, in middle school, I asked my mom how I could get people to like me more, or at least to treat me like a normal human being. She then listed many things, mostly about my appearance, that made me stick out. My socks didn't match my outfits. I wore pigtails, sometimes. I had a speech impediment, and still kind of do. And whenever people would greet me, I wouldn't respond. I like to point out that it wasn't that I wouldn't respond to people who greeted me, it was that I would just mutter soft hi back, but apparently they couldn't hear me. Or they would wave and I just wouldn't see them. I'm still mad about that part, but mostly because it just wasn't true, but I digress. No, I don't blame my mom for these comments. I know she was just trying to look out for me and give me the reasons I've been searching for years for on why people found me strange, but needless to say I haven't worn pigtails since, and have taken a lot of time on my appearance. Though this was a conversation that affected me quite negatively, it did start my diagnosis journey. I came to the realization that it wasn't that I didn't know social rules and cues, but that even when I did learn them and learned how to perform them, I didn't follow them because when I did, it felt wrong. I really tried to make it feel normal to act normal, and I did it for years, and it worked somewhat for a time, but every time I came back home from school, I'd have to do a massive recharge. Like full on, sleeping. Bad. But from kindergarten to around the middle of 8th grade, that was my normal social routine. That was my normal. And I was told that everyone had an urge to fit in, so I didn't really find anything wrong with it at first. And though that first statement is true and that everyone does want to fit in, but for me to fit in, I had to twist and turn my responses and conversations and put on a mask and pretend to be someone I wasn't. And really, when I pretended I was normal, people still knew that there was something off about me. They could tell that I wasn't truly being myself. And both being myself and pretending to be normal wasn't enough for me to feel like I was a functioning person in society. So it felt like I was just on a endless hamster wheel trying to figure out what was right. So from all of that I've just said, and probably my room and the posters I have, you can probably realize that I'm autistic. Now, when I say that I'm autistic, what I really mean is that I have autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. Personally, I prefer to say that I'm autistic, but some people on the spectrum prefer the terms person with autism or a person with ASD or autism spectrum disorder. So always ask people on the spectrum what terms they prefer. That's a big thing of mine. Please ask people. It's that easy, dude. There are many different definitions for autism, but for this video, I'll be using the Mayo Clinic definition. The Mayo Clinic defines autism as a condition related to brain development that impacts how a person perceives and socializes with others, causing problems in social interaction and communication. Now, I'm pretty sure that you realize this is a pretty vague description, but it's actually this vague for a reason. Many people seem to gloss over the spectrum part of autism spectrum disorder, and don't realize that the spectrum isn't like this. It's actually more like this. For example, look at these two spectrums. Which person is more autistic? I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, if you answered, you're wrong. If you look closely, you can tell that these two people both have the same amount of deficit bars, but one has drastic deficits in some categories but none in some, while the other has low deficit levels, but there are deficits in all categories. This is where the problem with labels like more or less autistic or low or high functioning arise. The thing with people on the spectrum is that they don't get a single dot on the spectrum, but rather separate dots for each category listed. Every autistic person's spread looks different, but it doesn't mean that one is more or less autistic than another. This also means that the autistic experience is different for everyone on the spectrum. If the definition of autism was more specific, a huge chunk of the autism community would be missed by that definition. And are there a lot of people still missed with that definition? Before I go over the people commonly undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, I need to give you a description of the autism diagnosis process, so you can understand what being diagnosed autistic actually means, and some of the symptoms included. Young children receive screenings for developmental delays at their 9, 18, 24, and 30-month checkups, with screening specifically for autism at the 18 and 24-month checkups. More frequent screenings may be done for children with a higher likelihood of autism, like having a family member with ASD, are suspected of having autism, have certain genetic conditions, or have a low birth weight. A caregiver's experiences and concerns are also considered during the screening process. If the child shows symptoms of autism or other developmental disorders, the healthcare provider may refer the child for additional evaluation. Developmental delays that may hint at autism include not responding with a smile or happy expression by 6 months, not mimicking sounds or facial expressions by 9 months, not babbling or cooing by 12 months, not gesturing, such as pointing or waving, by 14 months, not saying single words by 16 months, not playing pretend by 18 months, not saying 2-word phrases by 24 months, or losing language skills or social skills at any age. This is called regression. This additional evaluation is run by a team of healthcare professionals, including child neurologists, developmental pediatricians, child psychologists, and other types of professionals necessary to have an in-depth and accurate evaluation. This evaluation includes medical and neurological exams, assessments of the child's cognitive and language abilities, observations of the child's behavior and age-appropriate skills, including eating, dressing themselves, etc., and an in-depth conversation with the child's caregiver. For older children and adolescents, their school special education team may perform evaluation, but many times adolescents get forwarded to a healthcare provider that specializes in ASD after a child's caregiver, main teachers, or doctor's intervention. For adults, they may ask for a referral for an ASD evaluation completely on their own. So to sum it up, the evaluation process is about the same no matter the age of the patient, but the way they are referred to an ASD professional is different. During these tests, doctors look for symptoms and signs of autism and other developmental disorders that may first appear like autism or are commonly paired with autism. These symptoms include making too much or too little eye contact, appearing not to listen to people while they're talking, having difficulties with back and forth conversations, rambling about interests without noticing others' disinterest or without giving others a chance to respond, inappropriate facial expressions for situations, a monotone or sing-songy way of speaking, having trouble understanding other people's point of view or being unable to predict or understand others' actions, difficulties adjusting behaviors to social situations, difficulty connecting with others, echolocalia.
My decorpsinator serum, it's incomplete!
Oh, I hope it's not bad news. Oh, I hope it's not bad news.
Hyperfixations, becoming upset by slight changes in established routines and by unexpected transitions, or hypo and hyposensitivity to light, sound, textures, or temperature. After these evaluations, doctors consult the DSM-5s, also known as the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual's 5th edition, diagnostic criteria, and decide if the patient fits the criteria for autism. To meet this criteria, The patient must have persistent deficits in social communication and interaction across multiple contexts, and restricted and/or repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. These deficits and symptoms must have been present in the early developmental period and not better explained by a single intellectual disability acting alone or a simple developmental delay. Now, when I was a baby, routine autism screenings weren't as common as they are now. I did some research, and the earliest instance I could find of the state recommending the 18 and 24-month autism screenings was in 2008 when New York Governor David Paterson signed a law requiring the Department of Health to set up steps for early autism screenings. But, first of all, I'm not from New York. I'm from Wisconsin. Cheese and all. And, just like today, the screenings are only recommended, not mandatory. That's not good. From all my research, Wisconsin has no early diagnostic legislation, and because of that, I was never fully tested for autism. During my monthly doctor checkups, I was tested for developmental disorders including autism, but I passed the test somehow. I can't tell you what the tests included when I did them because I was, 2 at the time, but considering I'm making this video right now, either the testing wasn't thorough enough, or I was just really good at masking at the wee age of 2, which I don't think that was the case. So, I missed that opportunity, but some of my autistic traits must have been noticed later by a doctor or a teacher, right? Right? I wish I was kidding. They said I was too smart to be autistic. Despite the fact that my pediatrician called me the Eve baby because I reached almost all of my developmental milestones right before it became worrying, despite my stimming and crying when loud noises happened, despite my shy and emotional behavior, I wasn't autistic by their standards. The most confirmation of autism I got from a person outside of my family was my 4th grade teacher, who said that I might be autistic, but said that a diagnosis would cause more problems than solutions. I'll tell you right now, not getting a diagnosis when I was a child caused a lot of problems for me socially and mentally. Now, you may have caught on that I said she was the only person outside of my family who thought I may be autistic. And that's because my immediate family had a pretty big feeling I was autistic since I was a baby, despite what pediatricians said. My mom actually asked if there were any signs of me being autistic every school year and doctor's appointment until I was in high school. And that's really only because I figured out I was autistic by then. Doctors and teachers saw my mom as just an anxious first-time mother and thought she was just worrying over nothing. Turns out they were the ones who were wrong. Whoopsie daisy. Whoopsie. My dad also thought I may be autistic. And it's a story time now because I think y'all need to actually hear about this. Apparently when I was around 2, my mom brought me to the local pool during a hot summer day. And while I was standing around in the pool playing with a measuring cup my mom brought, 2 girls around my age came up to me and asked if they could play with me. I politely said no, which was and still is pretty common for me. And the girls tried to convince me more. One of the girls, while trying to convince me, put a hand on my shoulder and I screamed. I was bawling my eyes out. And my mom quickly walked over to comfort me and apologized to the girls because they were like, "What is wrong with this girl?" And when we came back home, my mom pulled my dad aside and told him that she thought I may be autistic. And I'm pretty sure she was expecting some "Oh, I'm not sure, Erica. I think we should get a doctor's approval." But what my dad said, he just said, "Oh, like my Uncle Joey." And then just kept raising me like I was any other kid. I legitimately cannot stress enough how grateful I am that my mom kept pushing for answers and that my dad has always accepted my autism. They're what all parents who have autistic children should be like. And I'm not kidding. I want to thank my mom and dad. They've made mistakes. But raising me and never fully blaming me for my autistic traits, that means and meant a lot to me. So just heads up, if you have an autistic child or you are gonna have children and that child might be autistic, be like my parents. It's really not hard. Treat them like a normal human being. Give them opportunities to learn. Oh my god, I could go on a whole rant about this, but this is a video about autism as a whole and not just my experience, but oh my god. So, to sum it up, my parents saw my autistic traits, but the healthcare system put on rose-colored glasses And I'm not the only one with this sort of experience. Not by a long shot. And there's a reason why there aren't as many women diagnosed with autism than men. Let's go back to the very beginning. In 1943, Leo Kanner does a study on a group of 11 children that had similar abnormal behaviors. Kanner found a common profile between the children, and described this by saying that their behavior is governed by an anxiously obsessive desire for the maintenance of sameness that nobody but the child himself may disrupt on rare occasions. That's probably my favorite description of autism ever. I think we should actually go back to, instead of just saying autism, saying that. Like, it's amazing. It's what I strive to be, frankly. He concluded that these children shared a distinct neurodevelopmental disorder called early infantile autism. His findings were well known by the English-speaking world, and they laid the groundwork for future research on autism. But though his study was very influential, there were some oversights. Namely, the fact that of the 11 children tested, only 2 were girls. That means that there were 4 times as many boys consulted in the study than girls. Because of this, the study unconsciously made it seem that autism was a male prominent disorder, when it actually seems not to due to recent research. Studies on autism soon after Kanner's study suggested that the male-to-female ratio of autism was 16:1, while recent studies have suggested the ratio is actually closer to 3:1. Though I don't blame Kanner for this oversight, there is another influential doctor I do blame. Hans Asperger. Asperger actually did a study on autistic children before Kanner in 1938, and wrote a comprehensive study on it for his postdoctoral thesis in 1942. But the thing is, his research didn't achieve global recognition until the 1980s, most likely due to it being in German. 1940s in German, if you get what I mean. He actually studied a wider variety of the spectrum than Kanner, but the thing is, he called the children he studied autistic psychopaths. And wouldn't you know it, maybe the whole 1940s in German thing wasn't too far off, because he was actually a part of multiple organizations affiliated with the NSDAP. If you don't know what the NSDAP is, yeah. Though there's no evidence that he was actually a part of the Nazi Party, he publicly supported racial cleansing and the euthanasia of disabled people. Also, he didn't study any autistic girls. At all. So, if people are wondering why the term Asperger's syndrome isn't widely used anymore, medically or socially, it's because Asperger was a literal Nazi supporter, and the term has been used to exclude lower support needed autistics from the spectrum. So, the first 2 researchers of autism didn't substantially include females in their research, and many other researchers and diagnostic tools hold the same male bias, even today. This not only glosses over women with autism, but also autistic traits that are more present or more masked in them. Recent research shows that nearly 80% of assigned female at birth people are undiagnosed by the age of 18. So this isn't just a minor thing that can make getting a diagnosis a little harder. It's a recognized and widespread problem that's been researched in the modern age. The way that autistic girls act and are perceived is also affected by how they are raised. Women are raised to be timid, quiet, and good at socialization when they do speak. This causes autistic females to have a higher chance of masking than autistic males due to the female-only expectations girls are exposed to. If you don't know, masking is the action of trying to camouflage or hide autistic traits in order to fit in with peers. Because females are more likely to mask, their autistic traits may be missed or overlooked. The biases of previous and current studies also affect which traits get overlooked. Because autism was originally represented as a male condition, a boy sensitive to sound is autistic, but a girl sensitive to sound is shy and sensitive. In a classroom full of talkative and misbehaving children, the quiet girl who rocks in her chair as a top student is overlooked. In a classroom full of talkative and misbehaving children, the girl who rambles about her interests and is sensitive to certain textures is an inconvenience. But when a boy is sensitive to sound and talks about robotics a lot, that's an autistic boy. And that's not even going into the fact that a black girl is less likely to be diagnosed than a white girl. Oh, you thought autism studies just had a male bias? No, there's some racism implanted in there too. That's probably making Asperger smile in his grave. In the recent age, there has been a surplus of research on how autistic women are more undiagnosed than men. But what there hasn't been as much public research on is how people of color are less likely to be diagnosed with autism. In both Kanner and Asperger studies, there's not a single person of color, and more recent studies sadly hold to that same white bias. Asperger would have loved this. People of color are also less likely to be recommended to get a diagnosis due to stereotypes of them being loud, disrespectful, or stupid. The knowledge and understanding of autism also tends to be lower in predominantly POC communities. Cultural or immigrant communities may even push feelings of shame and blame on them and their family, and it may seem like the best idea in the moment is to keep their disability a secret. Why give society more reason to treat you as less than human when you can just pretend? Teachers may also overlook autistic traits in people of color due to assumptions about the child's behavior or language abilities. Even when POC figure out they may be autistic, there may be some discomfort dealing with professionals who may hold racist ideologies or lack cultural understanding. Access to a diagnosis may also be limited due to financial and locational issues. Okay, now for my favorite part. Now that we've talked about the groups that tend to be undiagnosed, try to think of an example of a character in one of the groups in popular media. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, did you find one? If you did, good taste. I want to be your friend. If not, I don't blame you. Now, when people think of an autistic character, their first thought is probably someone like Sheldon Cooper, Raymond from Rain Man, or Sean Murphy from The Good Doctor. Looking at them side by side, they're pretty similar.
Straight white man.
Though they do portray autism, they don't portray it particularly well or accurately. Not only do they portray autism as a male and white dominant disorder, but they also only focus on specific autistic stereotypes, namely the savant trope. Now, I'm not saying that autistic people like Sheldon don't exist. They really do. But that's not the whole spectrum. Most media depicts their autistic characters as either low support needs and a super genius, or of extremely high support needs and no personal agency. It's really hard to find media that has an autistic character who doesn't fit these tropes. Autism representation in fictional media is able to impact people's views and knowledge about autistic people, especially for people who don't personally know an autistic person, making accurate and educational portrayals so important. Representations that use stereotypical or outdated ideas about autism contribute to negative views and actions towards autistic people, effectively causing more problems than acceptance of autistic people and traits. On the other hand, representations that challenge stereotypes about autism and allow nuanced autistic characters contribute to a higher and more accurate understanding of autism from the public. Though seeing a single positive short segment from a piece of media with an autistic character and it doesn't significantly make a person more knowledgeable about autism, it does cause a significant improvement in people's attitudes about autism. Negative and harmful portrayals of autism include having a one-dimensional autistic character, a lack of a personal narrative from the autistic character, seeing the autistic character as heroic for dealing or living with autism, use of the savant, hero, or eccentric genius trope, non-human autistic characters, derogatory language towards autistic and other disabled people normalized in the media, only straight white male autistic representation, implications that autistic characters have been robbed of their agency and independence because of their autism, depictions of the autistic character as a burden to friends and family, implications that autistic people can't have strong interpersonal relationships, and depictions of an emotionless autistic person. Positive and helpful portrayals of autism include nuanced autistic characters, depictions of less talked about autistic traits like hyperempathy, a strong moral compass, or shutdowns, use of correct autistic labels and characteristics, focus on the autistic character themselves, not the people around them, dual diagnosis, depictions of autistic people having strong interpersonal relationships, and wanting to educate and inform people instead of branding and exposing the autistic person. I want to give a specific shout out to some of my favorite depictions of autism media because sometimes it feels like trying to find a needle in a haystack and I really want to rant about them. I don't care if it's part of the project, I want to rant about them. Julia from Sesame Street is probably like the most educational portrayal in my list of like favorites. Why do I love her? Just amazing representation. I don't even know how to explain it, but like she like is little kid with autism, you know? Like she's also her dad is a musician and my dad is a musician, so Yeah, we're actually the exact same person. I also like how in the show they don't treat her autism as like some like bad thing. It's kind of just like, oh yeah, she's autistic. Like she acts differently than people sometimes, but like she's still a person. She is still a Muppet. Is she a man or is she a Muppet? No, she's Julia. Like I don't know how to explain it, but like I love her so much. Like I just love the Muppets in general. Having an autistic Muppet, like that was probably the best decision Sesame Street could ever make. Cause I know I'm not the only autistic person who loves the Muppets. Yeah. Okay. Also, there's Max from Mary and Max. This isn't like a very popular movie, but I would totally recommend it. It is so good. And it honestly has like the best autism representation I've ever seen with its character Max Horowitz. I don't like watching it. I was kind of scared that it like wouldn't be very good at portraying autism because it was made in like 2012 and like the 2010s for like autism representation was like really bad. I don't know why it was like specifically that era, but it was like so bad. So when I like watched it and it was like actually really good, I was like, it was outstanding. Like I loved it so much. I still love it. And it's also one of the only like pieces of media that I've seen that actually goes against like trying to find a cure for autism. Like I'll show you the clip, but like it like legitimately says like Max literally says like I don't want there to be a cure for autism and like that's okay. Like if my autism was gone, I wouldn't be me. He said something around the lines of like it would be the same as if like I had different colored eyes, and that's so real. Like there is no non-autistic me. Like I'm not someone trapped with my autism that has to be like let out by some cure. And that's also why Autism Speaks is bad. And yeah, it's also Australian. I don't know why I said that. I just feel like that has to be mentioned. It's Australian and it's good autism representation. Yeah.
Dr. Bernard Hasselhoff says my brain is defective, but one day there will be a cure for my disability. I do not like it when he says this. I do not feel disabled, defective, or a need to be cured. I like being an Aspie. It would be like trying to change the color of my eyes.
Quinny from Heartbreak High is probably the most like recent that I have on this list. I don't like she is such a good representation of a teenage girl with autism. Like I relate to her a lot. And also the actor who plays her, I gotta check her name, Chloe Hayden. She's also autistic, so it's an autistic actor playing an autistic character. I don't know, that's so special to me. Like that is so rare, and like you can tell that's an autistic character playing. I mean, autistic actor playing an autistic character. Like you can just like, it's so accurate that I don't think any neurotypical person could like do it like the way that Chloe Hayden portrays Quinny. Like it's so good. It's so Gen Z autistic girl. Like it's yes. The little space dude Benny from the Lego Movie, he is autistic. Does it say in the movie? No, but he is autistic. Like that. He is a special interest incarnate. And I think we need to talk about that more. I know some people have talked about that, but I need to put on the record that I am Benny, and you can't, like, I'm sorry, but, like, I am Benny, you can't be Benny. Like, Benny is autistic, y'all. Like, Benny, like, when he is finally allowed to make his spaceship, I almost cried. I was, like, 6, I almost cried. I was like, thank God. Like, he's been hoping to build that spaceship forever, and you finally let him. Yeah. Guys, I have to tell you about Stanford Pines from Gravity Falls. Frankly, I think the whole Pines family is autistic, but him specifically, he did something to my, like, 6-year-old autistic brain. Like, he made me feel seen. Like, Stanley is definitely a better person, but Stanford is way more relatable to me. And I have to say that, like, when I was a little kid, Gravity Falls was my special interest, and actually, it still is. I have the Book of Bill right here. Billiam is here. If you haven't seen Gravity Falls, this is him in college, technically, but, like, oh my god. The brown-haired dude with glasses, like, he is autistic. Like, just from this picture, you're like, oh, okay, like, he's on the spectrum. But, specifically, like, the fact that he moves to Oregon to hunt monsters because the supernatural is a special interest. I want to move to Oregon because of him. Also, that part of the book where he, like, Fiddleford saves him from the, like, oh my god, not like the Yeti, but the Krampus, saves him from Krampus, because Krampus, like, kidnapped, it's a whole thing. And then, like, Stanford realizes that Fiddleford got him a gift, but Stanford didn't get Fiddleford a gift. And he feels really bad. And also, like, the fact that, like, Fiddleford, like, left his wife for him, that's a whole other thing. These two are, like, definitely, like, there is no heterosexual, like, way to explain that. Yeah, so he feels bad. And so because of that, he puts on Fiddleford's favorite song, It Makes Hot Chocolate, even though he both hates hot chocolate and the song. That is an autistic person trying to show, like, hey, I love you. Like, that is, like, a genuine, like, way to show it, like, neurodivergently. I thought that was really good representation, actually. And also, I don't know. I don't know. And also, like, becoming obsessed with a yellow triangle person who says that you're a genius. And, yeah, that's pretty autistic, actually. I, too, would actually fall for Bill's, like, compliments. I get it. I don't know, I went on a whole rant about him, but, like, I was gonna make a full section of this video just on Stanford. But I decided not to. So you get around 3 minutes of me just talking about him. So what was the point of this video? My point for this video, my goal, was to teach people that autism is a wide spectrum and that everyone on the spectrum is wildly different. That girls can be autistic. People of color can be autistic. The media doesn't do autistic people justice at all. And it takes very specific people to actually make good representation. And a good knowledge of autism to make good representation. And that, like, autism shouldn't be a thing that people are scared of. I know that Autism Speaks has that whole thing of, like, I am autism, I'm gonna take your child's free will. Like, it's really bad. If you've seen the ad, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, I hope you learned. Be a good person, and just know that, like, autistic people will be chill with you if you just, like, do your research. It's that easy.